Hello, y'all. This is Coach Lindsay with the Jackass Podcast. Um, Coming to you. It's a little bit late tonight. I had to go to coaching school, which is one of the fun things to do in Texas, especially when you're a coach in Texas. So I'm doing this a little bit later. It'll be out by tomorrow morning. So y'all know this is Sunday. It was the first day of coaching school. It's really cool. Uh, I've been going to it. I think every year I've actually been coaching. Got to learn a whole bunch of stuff. So we'll talk about that today. We'll also talk about me questioning and trying to come up with a reason why people have such a problem with Donald Trump and can't get their emotions with him out of the way when he does stuff that everybody would like done or past presidents have done, and now people are like, oh, well, it's Donald Trump, we don't like him. And I think this is the worst. I think the vitriol for Trump and against Trump is the worst of any president in my lifetime. We're also going to talk about my friend's podcast. Got a couple friends that do a fantasy podcast. We will talk about we're basically going to talk about what they do and their quarterback rankings this week. I got some questions that I'm going to ponder aloud later on in this podcast. We'll talk wrestling storylines like we always do. Kind of probably talk some entertainment. Hadn't really been thinking much about it. Go over what my entertainment's been like while I've been off as a teacher. We're also going to go over kind of the STAR test stuff. If you don't know, if you're listening and you're not in Texas, STAR test is our big state test. So we're going to talk over some differences of that and what the Texas legislature wants to do, or our governor wants the Texas legislature to do. We may also talk about gerrymandering because that's going to be something that happens in this next session. So, all right, let's get to it. So, again, my name is Evan Lindsay. I am the Jackass from the Jackass Podcast. I am a coach by trade now. I'm a middle school coach. And I started off that way. When I got into teaching, my goal was to at least be a middle school teacher and be a middle school coach. And this will be my 5th year coaching. I think this was the 4th time I was at the state convention. So if you're not in Texas, for I guess it's an association. I don't know if it's really a union, but they probably do some union stuff for coaches. They give you some protection. You can get some discounts and stuff. But there's the Texas High School Coaches Association, and they hold a bunch of small conferences all over the place, all over the state. But they generally hold one big one, and that's like a 2.5-day event. And they've centered it in San Antonio for the most part, because I think this is the 3rd of the 4 years that I've been coaching or going to the convention, and it's here in town. So this morning up to this afternoon, I was at coaching convention, learning new techniques, expanding my mind to some stuff I didn't see, hadn't really researched up, but it was really cool to see. If you've never been, I don't know how it's like to business conventions and stuff, because coaching conventions, you have vendors there, exhibitors, and you can find, I know when I was at my former middle school, we got a 5-man sled, kind of like what the pros use, kind of like what the high schools were using, and what you probably see colleges use, which has a push and you can push up. Great for linemen, which is what I pretty much coach. They also have big exhibitor or big rooms filled with presenters. For football, especially for football, it's usually some of the top high school programs and all like the local state college programs. So you'll see coaches from the University of Texas, Texas State, Texas A&M, UNT, UTSA. I don't know if I've seen Houston and Rice, but I wouldn't be surprised. I know Baylor was doing some today. and you see all these different coaches. You'll see the head coach, which everybody will like, but you'll get to hear from their staff. So I went to like 4 today. Did one on like explosion and agility. That was the first one. It was the strength and conditioning one. And they were going through what they kind of do as a group, and the people presenting it, and had student athletes out there, football players, who were helping them, and they were going through the drills and stuff. So you got to see it, and that one was kind of cool. I went to every year. I went to one of our coaches courses that the UIL, who's the Universal Interscholastic League, which runs basically all the public education competitions. So they run the fine arts competitions. They run the like anything that has a competition to it at a public high school or middle school. UIL runs. So they have some courses that we have to take yearly, some courses that you got to take every once in a while. And so I went to one of them. It was the junior high courses, talking about some of the rules, talking about some of the stuff that you just have to know, 1 or 2 rules that have changed. And that's all there really was. I went to the Texas A&M one with their defensive line coach. That I kind of learned a lot, um, and some stuff that I can transfer to middle school. So all in all, it was a good day at coaching school. I enjoyed it greatly. Thank you, Texas High School Association. It's just cool to do. You get to see people you might not have seen for a while. You get to see a bunch of coaches from all over the state. So it's always a fun time for me. I enjoyed it today. So the next thing we're also going to talk about, kind of going from the happy side of me enjoying my day to the confusion I have about the either or for Trump. Either you are for Trump or you're full you're for Trump or you are fully against Trump. And there is like absolutely no in between. There may be, but it's you don't hear about the in between. So I won't say there's absolutely none. There's probably like 50% of the country that's like, when he does good, they're fine with it. When he does bad, they get mad for a second and they get over it. But there's a small percentage, and they're the loudest percentage. That it doesn't matter what Donald Trump does; he's the most evil person in the world. Or it doesn't, or they're on the other side of it, and it doesn't matter what Donald Trump does, and he's a god. I got a friend on that side of it, and I got a few friends, like we'll say social media acquaintances, are on the opposite side of it. So I'm just wondering why such vitriol. Why can you hate somebody so much? And most of the people that hate him probably don't know him. Like you just because he backs because y'all made a joke and he decided to go to the Republican side. So y'all got your feelings hurt. Is that what it is? He's not the first politician to change parties. Is it the fact that he just doesn't represent the touchy feely side of the Democratic Party? Because he's a baby boomer slash Gen Xer who just doesn't care what your feelings are? And that's most people. All these people that are bitching about your feelings so much, you're probably annoying the hell out of more people than you think. Lord knows I don't really care for people's feelings sometimes. But I'm not going to say that I love and adore Trump, but I don't have a problem with him as president. I thought he was more fit for office than Biden. Both times that they ran against each other, he was damn sure more suited for office than Kamala, in my opinion. Because I don't know what Kamala Harris has done in the political realm that would make you think that she could be a leader of this country. There are probably other, and let's get this out of the way. I'm not saying that because she's black or because she's a woman. I'm saying that just because she's her, and there's stuff that just rubs me the wrong way about her. In that, just the way she comes off, I think it's the condescension. Same reason I don't really like Gavin Newsom either. Um, there seems to be in politics a whole new wave of people who just think they're way better than they are, and they have filled themselves up so much that you can't tell them anything. So that may be it. That may just what rubs me wrong. And I'm not going to say that Trump's not so full of himself, but I think Trump's a businessman. And when you put a businessman in a government office, he's not going to look at it like a politician. He's going to look at it like a business, which is some of the problem that we have in this country is that we got a lot of people looking at this not like what the position is or what they think it should be from whatever their history is. Lawyers look at being in Congress like, well, we can write the laws that you can't find a loophole for or find 1,000 loopholes for because of the way they write the laws and how many things they do with the laws. Uh, so that's just my curiosity question. If you hear this and you want to make a comment, please do. I actually want to hear. I would love to have a genuine discussion about why people do or don't like Trump with somebody. Because man, it's annoying. It's annoying to turn on 3 news networks and everything he does is the wrong thing. And I'll be honest, I don't watch Fox News that much, but I'll watch clips of like shows that I like just to hear what they're saying. And I don't want to hear the other side either, saying that he's the greatest unless what they're saying has some backing. Oh, he did good. A lot of stuff I watch is more level headed or comedy. So that's what I'm thinking about on Trump this week. I know that there was a law passed for about cryptocurrency this week. I really don't know that much about it. I don't know much about cryptocurrency. It's not even that I'm really scared. It's just not something that I delved into when it was new. And now it's so high that I don't think it's funny. So I wouldn't know how to get into it. Or actually, I do. There's some apps I could get into it with, but it just hadn't been my thing yet. So that was a good thing. Now we're gonna get to kind of Texas education thing. So the Texas legislature. So this is the 20th of July. On the 21st of July, the Texas legislature is going to have a special session that Governor Greg Abbott called. One reason is to come up with a better system for warning in rural areas where there's a high chance of flood or natural disaster, like in Kerrville or anywhere along the Guadalupe. And if you don't know Texas, there's a couple other bigger rivers around Texas where depending on where the rain falls, or some smaller rivers where there could be flooding. There's little creeks and stuff that always flood. So this could be good for a lot of people, uh, especially rural communities. And if you don't know, for those who don't know what Texas geography is like, you have, like, if you go down south of San Antonio, you have like 3 other towns that are smaller than San Antonio. Maybe their populations combined equal San Antonio, like small little metropolitan areas or starting to grow to be metropolitan areas. Um, then your big four are basically, or probably big 3 areas of concentrated people are Dallas, Fort Worth, which if you don't know, Dallas and Fort Worth are actually like 45 minutes apart from each other. San Antonio, Austin corridor. And that has grown exponentially since I was a kid. Like there used to be an actual space between like San Antonio, Austin, from like the northwest side of San Antonio to get to where my family lived on the south side of Austin's like an hour and a half drive. And when I was a kid, it felt like a long drive because there wasn't much in between. There was a whole bunch of empty space. There was a whole bunch of just open space on the side of the highway. Now it's kind of like San Antonio bleeds into Shirts and Cibolo. Shirts and Cibolo bleed into There might be a 10-mile stretch where there's not much on it between New Braunfels and Cibolo. Then maybe like a 5-10 mile stretch between the Bromfields and St. Marcus where there's not much. And then maybe like a 5-10 mile stretch after you get out of San Marcos heading in Austin where there's not much. Besides that, there's little cities that have been popping up all over 35. Um, there's a Cabela's between here and Austin. There's a Buc-ee's, and I think Mike Savard told me that there was going to be another Buc-ee's. So there'll be 2 Buc-ee's between here and Austin, which is kind of ridiculous whenever that one's built. And then there's Houston, which is its own standalone thing. And El Paso would be the next biggest city. And then you have places like Amarillo and Lubbock, which are metropolitan areas, college towns, military base towns that have some population, but nothing like what San Antonio and Austin and Dallas and Houston have. Then you just have a bunch of little spots in between that you can find really cool stuff at. And that's kind of what Kerrville is. It's a little spot in between. They have a little college, Schreiner University is out there, but it's not that big of a town. So they're calling a special session to help with the flood warnings. They're also going to do redistricting because of that's what they're going to try and do, gerrymandering or redistricting. That's what Greg Abbott wants, and he's the one that has to call it. I think they're going to talk about they tried to ban THC, and Greg Abbott vetoed it at the last second. So they're going to try and, I guess, be strategic on how they're going to ban THC in the state. And then they're also going to talk about getting rid of the STAR test now, or revamping the STAR test in a way. So, and I'm going to be honest about this. There have been a Texas state standard test as long as I was in school, since I've been in school, and now that I've been teaching. Between the time that I graduated high school, when I graduated high school, we had what they called the TOS test. That was my generation's test. It felt like you were based, at least to me, from what I can remember. Now, this is 25 years ago. I don't ever remember being confused on the test questions. And I'm not going to say that people weren't. I know people who failed the TOS. I know people who did that. But to me, the TOS wasn't hard. Like, I remember flying through that test and then falling asleep for like 2 hours before we could leave. And I think I got masters on all my tests back then. After I graduated, they had something called the tax test. And that lasted probably for like 6 years, 7 years. And then when I got back to work, when I got to working in schools about 13 years ago, 12, 13 years ago, was my first school year where I basically worked like a full-time gig. Actually, I was subbing at the time. And then 2014 is when I worked my first full-time gig and got to really experience what the STAR was like from being a teacher. I'm going to tell y'all, right now, in my mind, it is so ridiculous how much time people got to take testing. So, testing is, I guess, tied to some funding, but now it's tied to an incentive funding for teachers in the state of Texas. It's called TIA. I don't exactly remember. It's Texas something. Texas Extra Income Initiative or something like that. So, that being said, people have been complaining about the STAR, especially since COVID happened, because that was the year we canceled the STAR. Didn't make the kids come back, we didn't have to take the tests, which was nice, but it made everybody like kind of happy that they didn't do tests. Now, here's a couple things about the tests. And I don't know, I'll be honest, it strikes me that it could be illegal based on the IDEA Act. If you don't know what the IDEA Act, that's what covers special education in schools on a national level. The state tests, so let me backtrack just a second. if you didn't know, not only am I a coach, I'm also a special education teacher. So I do kids' IEPs. We go over testing accommodations and if they need a modified test. When I was an IA, I think like the first 3 years I was an IA, the STAR had a second there's two versions of the STAR. They had a third version of it. You have the regular STAR test, which is what everyone's supposed to get. You had like a modified version of it, which they would cut out an answer basically and maybe simplify the terms and stuff like that. And then you have what they call STAR Alt, and that's for your really low level kids. And basically, I've done STAR Alt. You read the passage, like we get to do a whole bunch of prep on it for the kids, whatever's in their IEP. These are low functioning kids, so it's like really, really simple stuff. They're not marking down the test. The teacher is when the kid gives them whatever the answer is. So those were the three versions. Now, 3 years in, they got rid of the accommodated version of the test. Now, there are a whole bunch of accommodations you can do on the test. Now, if you're sitting there wondering why I'm harping on this, here's what my real problem with the STAR test is. When you actually go study education as your profession, it's not the psychology of it, but you get to see the studies of what people have done and the studies of how people have Bloom's taxonomy or some others where you kind of okay, so talking about Bloom's taxonomy, it tells you basically kind of tells you where kids supposed to be at as they grow up. When you get to middle school, that's when you can start having abstract or more open-ended questions. And when we say open-ended question, I'm not giving you an either or answer. We're looking for you to reason out the question. A more abstract thought is something that you may not have seen before. It's not concrete on paper a lot of times. Sometimes it's inferred. Sometimes it's just something you haven't thought of, whether it be the way a mathematical equation goes, poems, science stuff that's not really something you can physically see, but there's an abstract view to it. And social studies, the inferring from pictures and stuff like that. This is between 6th and 8th grade is where that mind starts developing that technique. Here's when you have kids who get so tested and so drained because we have to somehow stress the test because the test isn't like anything that we normally do in a classroom. Because teaching, you give them notes, you may have them follow along, fill in a word here or there, or have them write the whole notes in like Cornell version, something that they learn for college, or you have them just do a whole bunch of like hands-on tactile stuff and come up with some creative ways for them to remember words and stuff. And that's kind of what the classroom's like. They've done some kind of tactile stuff on the STAR test where they have drag and drops and it's pictures or it's words where you have to get the answers right in multiple things, more short answer questions. Like, so the STAR test now for reading, and if they have to do social studies and science, there are a bunch of short answer questions. Not so much essays, which they do still have essays that they have to write, but it's just like short answer stuff now, more than writing full 5 paragraphs. Excuse me. And what the state wants, or what the state had, the House in the state of Texas had passed, was kind of replacing the STAR with a more performance based test. So I have a couple questions about this because the one that we use now, because of TIA, the district I'm in, to get TIA, you have to have 2 tests that show improvement, basically, is what it says. I don't know if that's exactly what it says, but that's the overview of what it says. So, about let's see, I think 3, 4 years ago, they started doing map growth tests, and it's something that elementary always did, but now they implemented it like 3 years ago in the district as something that you did. Sixth grade started in math, then they started in English, and now every year that sixth grade class has built up. All their sixth grade class has built up doing this map test, and map test is taught. It's tested 3 times a year. Here's going to be the stress-inducing part of this. Right now, as a teacher in the district I'm in, we shut down for half a day 6 times a year for the map test right now. For 3 times a year for reading, 3 times a year for math. Now, the state is saying that they want us to do that for state tests. Here's my other question about this. Are they going to do the same type of thing that the map test does? The map test is kind of cool to me. It's like a little AI centric in a way. I think like everyone got like the first 5 questions are the same, 5 or 6. And then depending on how you answer those questions, the test suits itself more to you on how you answered it right, answered it wrong. And this test also has a function, which I'm hoping Star will do too if they do this, where you have to do it at a certain pace. It's only meant to be like an hour. The Star test is literally when their time limit was 3 and 4 hours when I first started doing this. It was a hard time limit. Like you got to put the time up on the board, yada, yada, yada. So with that being said, it's going to be interesting to see what the state does. Do I want them to get rid of Star? Yes, because those are some of the most boring days. And I'm going to say this for those of you that don't know. Prior to COVID, your kids would get done testing about half a day. And some kids who fell under a certain category would get extended time on the test. Now, everybody gets what they call extended time on the test, and it's all day. So, like the last time that I had to do a test, or that I was sitting in my room for a test. Some people took till like 3:40, and that's a long day for kids to be sitting in a classroom. Kids who aren't used to sitting and being bored, because nobody teaches their kids to be bored anymore. So we have this whole powder keg of stuff because of Star Test. And also the way the Star Test is written, and if y'all don't believe me, go look it up. TEA will release all the Star Tests. You can go look at the type of questions that your kids are doing and see if you could pass that test. Because it is ridiculous how the test looks. So I'm hoping on that they do change the testing a little bit so we can get to teaching and guiding. And another reason is the data for the STAR test doesn't help us in that current year. You take the STAR test in March, April, and May, and that data just tells you what THSCA they didn't master for that grade level. And if you don't get that, so THSCA is Texas essential knowledge and skills. That's basically what everyone in the state has to go by, saying this is minimally what these students need to learn. ELA generally has 12 big THCs, and there's a whole bunch depending on genre and whatever you're talking about that go with those THCs when you're teaching. So you get a lot of recursive stuff, a lot of stuff that you kind of go over and over and over. Inferencing you go over and over and over again. Just a whole bunch of sentence structure, writings, and stuff like that. You go over and over again. It's recursive. It just keeps coming back. Math is built upon. So if you tell me what sixth grade math did, great. Now we're going to do the same kind of thing, but we're going to build upon it this year. So if I'm just seeing what last year's data was after a summer, and after knowing you didn't probably want to test that day, we'll see how it goes, kind of deal. So that's the thing. I just hope that they do right by people and the kids, because I think just the stress that that particular test causes. It was stressful when we were kids and it was toss, or the generation after that where it was tax. But the star is just ridiculous. It's also attached too much to the school accountability grading system, where you get A, B, C, D, or E, or F, which is a load of horse crap. Because when your kid accumulates a grade in a class, I want you to think about this. If you go look at your son or daughter's grade right now, or when the school year comes back, most school districts or most schools say, hey, you got to have 2 assignments a week and you got to have this many tests per grading period. And that is how your students graded is over time. And the teacher, depending on the class, is usually has their own grading system in mind. It is subjective, especially like ELA grades and stuff that's not as hard stuff where you have to bring your opinion and back your opinion. Those are usually more subjective. So I can understand people want to complain about that. But as long as you can prove it structurally, it's usually good. Math and science are usually more concrete in the answer that they're looking for. So that's kind of my opinion on the STAR test. If you think I'm being ridiculous, fine. You haven't stood all day in a class just pacing, basically watching kids now, not in a test booklet, but on a computer, and making sure that that's all you're doing. You can't do anything else. You can't be productive as a teacher in any way except in just watching the kids. So if you think my salary is worth getting paid 4 days like that, okay. Like, so that'll be one. Also, so sports. Sports this week, the only really big news, and I addressed it last week, was kind of how the WNBA is handling Caitlin Clark, or handling. I think the WNBA thinks that they're a bigger sport than they actually are. I don't know what the statistic is, because I wasn't a sports fan or as avid of a sports fan back in the early '80s, late '80s. I didn't really become a sports fan until the early '90s. Like those 3 Super Bowl teams where the Cowboys were when I started loving football. David Robinson, Vinny Del Negro, Spurs, the start of Michael Jordan being great was a big thing. That's when I became like an actual sports fan. That being said, I don't think the WNBA doesn't realize that, or someone in the WNBA doesn't realize that they still have some growing to do. The great thing about like the WNBA is you've gotten more eyes on girls sports. Okay, that's great. You've gotten more people seeing what people can do in girls sports. And that's great. I do remember watching, I'm guessing was the catalyst for it with the 96 Olympic team. I remember that squad. I remember watching that squad as well as watching the USA Dream Team too. That's just what I remember. So I think if the WNBA started playing their cards right, play up the Caitlin Clark stuff, play up the Angel Reese stuff. Not them complaining and saying that they need to make as much money as the guys. Because what they really need to do is find ways to be marketable and I don't agree with Gil's arena. I've seen the clip or seen someone say it one where maybe they should lower the rim. I think the beauty of girls sports is it's a team oriented game a lot of times. It's a lot less one on one. So that's the beauty of girls sports. It's just more team oriented. It's fun to watch. It's fun to watch the passing. So, but I think they need to play up that Caitlin Clark Angel Reese rivalry because that's what brought a whole bunch of eyes to college basketball. That's when I first heard of Caitlin Clark. It's the old story. You have to have the protagonist and the antagonist have to be as good of each other. Because if y'all don't believe it, go look back at NBA history. Not until Magic and Larry Bird got here, where they were like Batman and Joker, did it actually work for the NBA. NBA had a dominant team for a while, but you got to have competition. You got to have people being competitive, and you got to have someone willing to be the villain in that. That's kind of what I think on it. Besides that, no real big sports news. It was Jimmy V week. It was kind of, which is one of my favorite weeks to watch some of those stories because Jim Valvano gives one of my favorite speeches, sports related of all time. Tells great stories. So of course I'm gonna love him. And now I don't know how to swing this. You know what? Because Jim Valvano in his speech talks about or the first time he went into Rutgers and was coaching the freshman team, and he talks about copying Vince Lombardi's speech, which is a great story. And I think having those stories sometimes is kind of where people get to know their coaches. It was actually kind of one of the things that they said at the coaches convention today too, um, and how you let your kids see where you messed up, let your kids see what you've been doing, kind of deal. So speaking of messing up, I haven't figured a way to swing this easy. Actually, you know what? Speaking of messing up, I think my friends on their podcast mess up on their fantasy list a little bit. I can understand some of the reasoning, but they did. So my friends do Three Putts and a Duck podcast. It's a fantasy football podcast on Spotify. They're not paying me, but I'll give them some praise. I am going to say that my buddy John sometimes lets his emotions get the best of his fantasy thing. So I was going back. They gave a top 20. I gave like a top 10 the other day, and I'll probably go back and I think I'll do rankings for I'll go look at a rankings and probably go over if I was drafting who would be my top targets at every position next week. But I just want to complain about theirs. Here's what I don't get. So my buddy John, I just kind of wrote down a couple of them and then their conversation. He does it with our buddy Steve, also known as Poop Dick, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know where he came up with that team name, but that's the only one I remember. Um, my buddy John, and he says it's because Dak Prescott was injured for the past 2 years at the end of the season. I think he needs to go correct himself. 2 of the past 3, he's been injured at the end of the season, which I'm not going to deny. Because I went and looked up his thing. 2023, like since 2020, every odd year, Dak Prescott has played the full season. So 2025, if you're going on that, and hopefully it'll stand, he'll play the full season of 2025. And he's got him ranked in his bottom tier of the top 20. I think that Dak Prescott this year will probably be a top 8 fantasy quarterback. Because see, he may not have the legs like Lamar Jackson or Jaden Daniels or even Jalen Hurts, but he knows when to run. He's still not afraid to run. He'll run. They just don't call it as many runs as they used to. I kind of went and looked up his career stats. He's never really been like a huge runner. I think he had like 350 some odd yards 1 year. But besides that, he's a pocket first passer. He's a pass first quarterback and then run if it's wide open type deal. He just happens to be faster and more athletic than a lot of quarterbacks that do it that way. So I think he'll be a top 8, especially when you add in George Pickens to that receiving room. And their top 3 receivers will probably be CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, and Jason Ferguson. And kind of one of my, I guess it's because my buddy's not a Cowboys fan. Like neither one that do the three putts in the Duck podcast are a Cowboys fan. One's a Texans fan and one's a um, Patriots fan. But I think the Dallas offense is going to be better this year. I think they're also going to be able to protect Dak better this year. In that, I'm hoping what they'll do is with that big beef of an offensive line that they have given themselves, they will run the ball a lot more. And so that will open up what Dak does really well, which is play action pass. That's also going to get CD and George Pickens open a little bit more. And if they try to double cover either one of them, that's going to leave probably a back out of the backfield, a shallow receiver, or the tight end wide open, which is which Ferguson's a good tight end. That is one position that when I look at Dallas, I don't think they haven't. They've had a top 10 probably tight end group as long as this scouting staff has been there. I don't think it's the coaches. They find really good tight ends, and they have since Jason Witten. So that is a position that they pick very well. Just like they pick out edge rushers really well. They're starting to pick out secondary really well. Linemen, for the most part, they pick them out really well. The part that they've had trouble filling, and some of it's because just we've gotten away from, like, people have gotten away from it, is the middle of the defense. One, the scheme that they ran for the past like 5 years didn't suit having a big middle of the defense, and a lot of places don't anymore. So that's why we've gotten faster and faster and faster. But that's also why you're getting more and more big runs up the middle unless you have some people that can hit or you have a scheme that's fit for the run. So I think Dak will be a top 8 quarterback. You know what? Looking at this list, so I think Penix will probably be like a top 15. He's got some good receivers down in Atlanta. His running ability will make him better. So I think he's got him in his bottom tier, but I think he'll probably be a tier up. He'll be worth starting at some point in time this year. I didn't write all these down, so I'm kind of doing some by memory. Here's where I have a problem with Steve got Jordan Love and Stroud at like 17 and 16. I think they'll be a good starting quarterback. I don't think good fantasy starting quarterback. TJ Stroud, I think will be, and honestly, I've probably got too many places where I've got Stroud, but I think he'll be a top 12 quarterback. Love that offense. He hadn't looked that bad, so I think he'll be a top tier quarterback. I have trouble. They got Fields in the top 15. I don't know. I think Fields is going to be a lot better. His running ability is really, really good. Hopefully the Jets, and this is one on my, hopefully the Jets can be stable enough to get him to do what he needs to do. But I don't think so. It's the Jets. The Jets mess up quarterbacks like nobody's business. So, but hopefully. My other big complaint about my friend John is that he didn't have Patrick Mahomes on the list. And I struggle with this in the way that I know looking at stats, he's gone down, but I think he's bound to have a better year because now he's got some receivers that kind of know. He's got young receivers that have finally kind of learned how to be receivers in the NFL, and they'll probably have a better year. So that's one of the things. Now, both of them had Jaden Daniels in the top 5, and I I think Jaden Daniels will be a top 12 quarterback. And I'm not even going on the Terry McLaurin stuff or whatever's going on with Terry McLaurin holding out and all that. I think that them having that Jaden Daniels will just be a really good quarterback with who and be able to get to the receivers that he needs to get to. And he's got legs. My only worry about someone like Jaden Daniels is his frame in the NFL. It's kind of like my fear with Victor Wembanyama in the NBA and kind of like Durant in the NBA. Their frame's just so thin. In the NFL, that makes a difference. I think he needs to bulk up right a little bit, but so that scared me. If Jaden Daniels someone gets a good clean hit on him, that could be a bad thing. So that worries me. People gonna figure out some of his tendencies this year. Defensive coordinators had time to look, so that'll be interesting. I'm beginning to think that I wonder in what year Lamar Jackson will slow down on the running, but I don't think he is now because he's got the perfect complement at running back in Derrick Henry, in that he's got a bruiser and you can just beat up that front seven with Derrick Henry and then Lamar Jackson still running. So I think he's probably going to be another year of if he's 1, 2, or 3, nobody would be surprised in points. And I don't think his yards from rushing drop off because you still have Derrick Henry in the backfield. And if they run that option, which I think they do, what are you going to do? You going to put which poison you picking? Getting beat up by Derrick Henry, and he can still explode out for a 60-yard run, or just having Lamar Jackson scamper down the field. Which would you rather it be? Because that's a pick your poison match. So those were my complaints about their list. So, but and the fact that here's my thing. Sometimes listening to Steve to me is odd. He just some of his thought process. Now I don't know him that well, so and he can take that as he wants. But Josh Allen, I think is a good enough quarterback to make whatever receivers he's got around him look good and get better. And I think he's had year 2. He may have some year 3 receivers out there. His year 2 with that rookie from last year, their breakout receiver last year, who I did have in some spots. So I like him. But I don't think he's going. I think those receivers will get better and give him better numbers because quarterback's kind of reliant on how good the receiver is to get better numbers. So I think he'll be a top 5 quarterback. Here's the one that I do have trouble with. And they both kind of have Joe Burrow in their top 5-ish. I like Joe Burrow as a quarterback. He's a really good quarterback. He's got 2 really good receivers. But is his offensive line good enough to hold up and keep him on his feet? Because I don't think that they've spent a lot of money fixing the protection of the offensive line in Cincinnati. And I don't think, and if you haven't also fixed the defense, That means defense gonna get 3 and out, and you're gonna bring out a tired offense, and eventually that's gonna cause mistakes. So I don't know how big of a thing it's gonna be for Joe Burrow. Maybe he's top 10, but I don't think he's top 5. That's my opinion. Certainly, he's top 12. If you have a 12-team league, you should start him. And by the way, they were basing this whole list on doing a 12-team PPR league with standard scoring. Um, so those are my only complaints about it. I'm just messing with them if they're listening. And then, so we're gonna go from the drama of the NFL and the quarterbacks to I'm gonna say there's something I really like on WWE right now, and it is a tag team of Charlotte Flair and Alexa Bliss. It's kind of it's an old school pairing type thing to me. The WWE's done 100 times, where they take enemies or frenemies or people that just didn't really have anything going on and make them a tag team. And when they're people that get along, you can tell. And it's just been fun watching over the past couple weeks someone like Charlotte Flair and someone like Alexa Bliss, where when you put their titles together, they've had like 20 top tier title reigns between the two. Charlotte's got 14, Alexa got like 5 or 6. Those are people that know what they're doing, that know how to get over, and they're getting over great. Um, I think you still got a couple years for like the women's division in the past decade has gotten so much better, and there's a lot of times where it's actually better than the men's stuff. I think storyline wise, they had to figure out storylines that fit the women and what repeat storylines you can and can't do with the women, because there are repeat storylines that go on. It's just two different characters doing it, and they put their own spin on it through all of wrestling history. So, so that's one thing I've really liked. I like seeing the OTC come out on Monday Night Raw. That was a good one to see. Kind of the hesitation with CM Punk and the coming and helping his cousin out. Thought the storyline with Jacob Fatu and Solo Sikoa was corny this week on SmackDown. They probably could have gotten better looking outfits. If y'all watch the SmackDown, just so you know, that's not what police officers in San Antonio wear. They haven't worn those light blue shirts as long as I can remember. It's either dark blue or black, and most of them wear black. So that's just something. Even like Northside cops, the school district I work, they wear black uniforms. So that's just something to think about. Uh, Corny storyline, but you know what? I get it. Should be a good storyline. Hopefully, they can get this back up to, I guess, what the bloodline storyline should be. That be like, bruh. Um, that was fun to watch. NXT's always fun to watch. Trick Williams is just fun to watch. Period. And actually, speaking of Trick Williams, Carmelo Hayes, who's up on the SmackDown roster, him and that match with Damian Priest was fun to watch. I really like Damian Priest. I didn't for a while. I also really like what they're doing with Aleister Black. So that's been cool. So those are that darkness of Aleister Black's been cool to bring back in the WWE, and kind of his I don't give a shit attitude has been wonderful. So that's where I'm at on that for WWE. The and the other one, the other big one, the Cody Rhodes John Cena storyline for SummerSlam. I kind of like that. I think it was. You know what? It was a bad attempt to make John Cena look like a chicken shit heel, but gave Cody Rhodes like a strong look for him to beat the hell out of him, even though he was the baby face, to get the match that he really wants. Just it came off wrong with John Cena being the baby, the chicken shit heel to me. Um, if you don't know what that means, it means he's finding excuses um to, to not do the match or whatever. So, but I thought that was cool. So VW was great. That's been my entertainment for the week a lot of times. And actually, right before I started doing this podcast, I was watching a version of King Arthur that I love watching. So that I don't find on streaming services much. I just found it today. So that was cool. That's been cool. So to be honest, I hope y'all enjoy the podcast as school starts up. Hopefully, I'll be able to do this still consistently because I only got like 2 weeks left till we fully start school. This will be my last week doing strength and conditioning at the high school that I work at. So maybe next week I'll give some more stories about myself and tell you why I am the way I am, or tell you some more stories about me that hopefully make this whole thing make sense. Because I'll be honest, I'm just shooting from the hip a lot of times with a couple notes. So, hey, y'all. This is Coach Lindsay from the Jackass Podcast. Y'all have a good week. Peace.